Making TV is making TV watchable again. Join us on the Active Kingdom Entertainment Network. Download Taken TV from your App Store now.
Hi, I'm Joe Sweeney. I founded the Acervo Project in response to the growing epidemic of human trafficking and child exploitation. Classifying this as an epidemic is an understatement. Our investigation teams and cyber analysts are tracking child predators every day. We're making a difference, but we need your help. The average age of a trafficked child is just 14 years old. Will you join the Acervo Project team? Donate $14 a month to protect the next at-risk 14-year-old. Pledge your $14 a month at theacervoproject.org. That's ASSERVO.org.
From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Washington Watch. I'm Jody Heiss, Senior Vice President here at the Family Research Council. And before we get underway today, let me take just a moment of personal privilege and give you some updated information. Tony will be back in the saddle tomorrow, and we're all excited about that. I would like to just personally extend a huge thank you to him for entrusting this chair and this microphone to me over the month of August. It has in every way been a joy, a thrill, and an incredible privilege and honor to sit in for him. But looking forward to him being back in the saddle tomorrow. He's needed some rest, and he's also needed some time with his father as he has undergone some very serious surgery, which I'm sure we'll get an update on when Tony returns tomorrow. But also, I just want to say thank you to the incredible team at Washington Watch and FRC, from the brainstorming team that meets every morning to the research team that does an amazing job, the production team that actually gets this to you, our viewers and listeners, every day, and the scheduling team that makes sure we have people lined up. It's been an honor to work so closely with each of you and to see the enormous amount of work that you do. And also to each of you who are part of the audience. It's been an honor to be with you as well. So with that, I just extend a sincere, heartfelt thank you to each of you. And let's get underway with the program today. Of course, first off, on all of our hearts and minds are those who are in Florida who have been left vulnerable by the hurricane that has ravaged the state and southern part of Georgia. Of course, it could have been worse than it is, but that is not to say that many lives have nonetheless been devastated. So we encourage all of our viewers and listeners to remain in prayer and to offer support in any way that you can and as the Lord leads. That is very much needed right now. Also coming up on the program today, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo this week became the third Biden cabinet member to visit China since June. And during her 4-day tour, which ended today, the Commerce Secretary said her goal was to open formal and direct channels of communication to resolve business issues. And she added this.
I want to be clear. We are not compromising or negotiating in matters of national security, period. But this is meant to be a dialogue where we increase transparency and where we are clear about what we are doing as it relates to export control enforcement.
Not compromising. But didn't she already do that when her department lifted restrictions on 27 Chinese companies and organizations ahead of her visit? Well, I'll discuss this in a little while with China expert Gordon Chang. And COVID has been coming back into the news recently, especially with the approach of flu season. We're even seeing the return of mandates in certain pockets across America. But with election season also underway, will the Biden administration try to bring back the unpopular federal mandates? Well, at present, the answer to that is no. They are just recommending that everyone get the latest jab, which for some people, by the way, will be their 6th or 7th jab.
We know that, as you all know, vaccinations against COVID-19 remains the safest protection for avoiding hospitalization, long-term health outcomes, and death, which is why we are going to be encouraging Americans to stay up to date on their vaccines.
Well, that was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre earlier this week. I'll discuss the latest developments on this with academic clinical trialist and epidemiologist Dr. Andrew Boston a little bit later in the program. And speaking of things that just won't go away, authorities in Finland are at it again. They are putting Finnish Member of Parliament, Päivi Räsänen, back on trial for expressing a biblical understanding of marriage and sexuality. I'll get the latest from Paul Coleman, who's the executive director of Alliance Defending Freedom International. And to close out the show, I'll bring back FRC's David Clausen to continue unpacking the new Worldview survey that was commissioned by FRC's Center for Biblical Worldview. What do Christians believe about transgenderism? And how many churchgoers believe the Bible speaks to the issue of religious liberty? Well, we'll go over this and much more as the program unfolds. So we've got a packed program, as always, lined up for you. And of course, our website is tonyperkins.com. There you can find tons of resources as well as archived programs. And if you happen to miss any portion of today's program, you can catch it there on the website, tonyperkins.com. All right, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, concluded her 4-day visit to China today, telling reporters that she hopes to see some results in the next few months. Well, her message to American businesses was to continue investing in China, even after recognizing earlier how some companies are beginning to view China as uninvestable. So what can we draw from the trip? Well, joining me now to discuss this is China expert Gordon Chang. He's the distinguished fellow, senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute and the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. You can follow him on social media on the former platform of Twitter under the handle of @GordonG.Chang. Gordon, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Well, listen, as I mentioned just a moment ago, the Commerce Secretary is the latest Biden administration official to visit China here recently, hopefully to strengthen some communications between the two countries. But before we get into the actual visit, refresh our viewers and listeners, who else in the cabinet has recently been to China?
There have been 4 straight visits of senior Biden administration officials to Beijing without a return visit by a Chinese official. And it started in June with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. It continued with that infamous visit of Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. John Kerry, the climate czar, was next. And now it's been Gina Raimondo, the Commerce Secretary. And the problem here is that we are giving the Chinese the impression that we ourselves believe that we are supplicants to China, because this is unprecedented in the straight visits to Beijing without a return visit.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're communicating. What do you think this administration is trying to do with all these visits?
I actually don't know, because what these visits do is it makes it harder for the administration to accomplish its own goals because they're making the Chinese more arrogant. There are two things I can guess. One of them is that, as we know, Secretary Blinken talks a lot to Henry Kissinger. They basically live in the same building. And so, Kissinger has been warning about war. In June, he said that war between China and the United States over Taiwan is, quote unquote, probable. And so I guess the Biden team is trying to desperately prevent a war. But what they're doing is actually accelerating it by making the Chinese even more emboldened. The other thing is that maybe the Commerce Secretary knows that American business is going to leave China anyway, so she doesn't want to say, oh, you should leave China, because she doesn't want to be blamed for the severing of relations. And so she's saying, oh, yeah, invest in China. The problem there, Jody, is that China is increasingly dangerous for American business and Americans and foreigners in general. And as a matter of protecting Americans, she should be urging American businesses to get out of China as fast as possible. We have seen this before in Chinese history where they attack foreigners, and that's exactly what's going on right now.
Excellent point. And, the Commerce Secretary said there was no compromise, and yet there were 27 Chinese companies on our blacklist who have been taken off that list in relation to this tour, this visit by the Commerce Secretary. Can you tell us about that? So we have these 27 companies taken off the blacklist, but what did we get, if anything, in return?
The only thing that we got, Jody, was, I suppose, the right for Secretary Raimondo to go to Beijing. I think this probably was a condition that the Chinese imposed, taking the 27 companies off the unverified list of the Commerce Department. But this is really wrong. If you're going to make a concession, you should get a concession at the same time. Sending the Commerce Secretary to Beijing should not be viewed as a concession. Because right now, China needs us much more than we need China, because the American economy is chugging along. I mean, there are problems, of course, but we're chugging along, and China is falling apart. And so they need foreign business. They need American business. And so we've given them a big favor and gotten nothing in return.
Well, it's so frustrating. Do you have any idea what other things of substance were discussed during the meeting?
They probably, we know that they set up these bilateral forums on discussing America's national security restrictions on Chinese companies, sort of explaining them. Well, we shouldn't be explaining our rules to the Chinese. They can read. They can read very well. They go to Harvard. They go to Cambridge. They go to Oxford. They can read. The other thing is that there was the issue about tourism, about encouraging Americans to go to China and Chinese to come to the United States. But what we're doing by sending tourists to China is just increasing the number of potential hostages, because China has been taking hostages, including Americans. And I'm sure the other thing that they talked about was China not taking deliveries of 737 MAXs. So it's a Boeing issue there as well. The refusal to take those planes is unjustified, another Chinese trade violation. And instead of talking about this, we should be imposing costs for unjustifiable Chinese behavior. Let's give the Chinese something to talk about. Now, I don't think we should be talking to China anyway for a lot of reasons. That's a very involved conversation. But if you think we should be talking to China, and the Biden administration obviously does, then at least make it possible to have a meaningful conversation. You know, over these 4 trips, there have been virtually no meaningful conversations with the Chinese as far as we can tell.
Gordon, listen, we've only got about a minute or so left. I know the Shanghai Communist Party secretary said that he wants a stable relationship between the United States and China. And they're also wanting some sort of rational and practical policies. 30 seconds or so, what do you think they mean by that?
They mean the end of all American defensive measures. Essentially, they want concessions from us. They don't want to give us anything. And so, yeah, that sounds nice. But if there's instability in the relationship, and there certainly is, it's because of China, not because of the United States.
Well, it's a very interesting scenario, and it can be a frightening scenario that's unfolding before us. Gordon Chang, thank you so much for your insight on all of this. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch.
Thank you, Jody.
All right, friends, coming up, the administration that tried to force all Americans to get the jab is at it again. We'll see where all this is going. We'll talk about what's up the sleeves of this administration right after the break, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
FRC, celebrating 40 years with Dr. James Dobson.
And I just want to congratulate you on everything that's said and done there. I believe in the Family Research Council and the work that it's doing. There aren't very many left that are that true blue, that conform with biblical truth. But this organization has done that, and I congratulate you for it.
In recent years, Christians have seen an accelerated assault on not just our core beliefs, but their very foundation. Now is the time to build on that foundation, strengthen our faith, and learn how to translate our beliefs into actions that engage the culture around us. That's the purpose behind this year's Pray, Vote, Stand Summit. Believe and engage. Pray, Vote, Stand Summit is a national gathering of spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives, or SageCons. We'll hear from Christian leaders, worldview experts, government officials, and more. We'll discuss important issues like the sanctity of life, religious freedom, protecting students, strengthening families, praying for our nation, and how you can impact America's future from a biblical worldview. Together, we can believe and engage. Join us September 15th through 17th in Washington, D.C. for this pivotal event. Register now at PrayVoteStand.org.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss, and an honor to have you on board with us. With fall and winter comes cooler weather, and of course with the cooler weather comes flu season. Well, nowadays there's also concern of a possible resurgence of COVID cases, and COVID shots come with that. And of course those shots have been updated in response to the current circulating variants that are expected to be around, and the new vaccine is supposed to be available sometime in mid-September. The Biden administration is going to be encouraging all Americans to get that new vaccine, but that's not all. Last week, President Biden drew attention by telling reporters that he plans to ask Congress for funding for a new COVID vaccine.
I signed off this morning on a proposal we have to present to the Congress a request for additional funding for a new vaccine that is necessary, that works. And tentatively, not decided finally yet, tentatively it is recommended that, it would likely be recommended that everybody get it, no matter whether they got it before now.
So at least we're being told this one is going to work, but are we making COVID a bigger deal than it should be? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is academic clinical trialist and epidemiologist, Dr. Andrew Bostom. Dr. Bostom, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Thanks. Nice to be with you, Jody.
Well, thankfully, Americans have been putting COVID-19 behind them. I think over the number of cases and deaths shrank significantly, and we're all grateful for that. But of course, flu season is now coming back, which also means COVID season is coming back. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the latest figures and about the latest variants that we can expect?
Well, I mean, we're seeing a slight uptick in cases, and I hate the definition of cases because it just means that people have tested positive for whatever reason that they're being tested, and that doesn't tell us very much, because what happens, unfortunately, Jody, is that the positivity is like a tar baby. It labels you, even if it's insignificant infection, as being, quote unquote, hospitalized with COVID and potentially even dying with COVID. And we have good metrics now, which at least, help us discriminate between with and from. And they just seem to fade into the background. You can search through Department of Health websites and look at some of their data more carefully, and you can find, for example, when I look in Rhode Island, that a third or less of the hospitalizations with COVID are actually because COVID is the primary cause. And even there, they hedge a little bit. They say primary or suspected primary. So you really have to take a lot of these numbers with a grain of salt. But yeah, you're absolutely right, because we're heading into the fall, flu season. We're seeing a slight uptick. There's no stress at all on the system whatsoever. We have this huge pool of people who've been infected multiple times, which confers, the most robust and enduring and flexible immunity. And frankly, I think it's much ado about nothing. And even the introduction of this new vaccine, at least I know what Biden's talking about, but the vaccine that's about to come out in a couple of weeks is targeting the XBB 1.5 variant, which at the time the vaccine was approved might have been predominant. But a couple of weeks ago, it only accounted for less than 5% of the current infections by surveillance. And by the time the vaccine is actually rolled out, it'll probably be down to 0%. So we're constantly, chasing our tail with this kind of, and it's, you can fault if you want to, manufacturers, the government, but it's just the nature of mRNA vaccines. They mutate wildly, which is why the flu shots themselves, influenza is also an mRNA, an RNA virus. It's very ineffective. We have almost a half century of data on the flu vaccine. It's very ineffective, and certainly doesn't confer sterilizing immunity where you get immunized and you won't transmit to other people. And it's not particularly effective at preventing hospitalizations or deaths. We know all this, and yet we keep pushing.
We just heard the president say, but this one's going to be effective. This one's going to work. And I don't know. It may be because of election season approaching, or maybe perhaps they've learned some lessons. I doubt it, but perhaps. But the Biden administration, at least at this point, does not appear to be going down the pathway of mandating the newest COVID jab, at least not so far. But they are going to be recommending it to everyone.
Yeah, I didn't.
So what's your thoughts?
Mandates should be completely verboten, but even a broad recommendation is absurd, because it's a very risk. Both influenza and COVID are really risk stratified. They target the frail, particularly the frail elderly. I wish we had more effective prophylaxis for them. Frankly, we don't. But if you're going to apply it at all, it should be to a niche group that's at the highest possible risk. And broad recommendations are really absurd. And with the COVID vaccines, we know it's not common, but they carry a significant toxicity package with them. Particularly, we've seen this signal. Again, it's not common. It's a rare phenomenon, but it's a serious phenomenon of mRNA vaccine-induced myocarditis, and some rarer still cases, myocarditis and sudden cardiac death. All for
Let me get your quick reaction. Let me get your quick reaction to this. We've got less than 2 minutes here, and sure. I want to get your reaction. The Five on Fox, their resident liberal Democrat, former Democratic representative Harold Ford, said this. I want to get your reaction.
I won't wear a mask, but I'm going to get the shot.
You are? What number shot is this for you?
I've had it so I'm due one in October. I had one in April.
How many? What's the total?
This will be my 7th.
7 shots.
And I've had COVID 3 times.
Okay, we've got 30 seconds. Real quick response.
The laughter underscores the absurdity of what he just said. And the serious part is that there is one of our immunoglobulins that protect us. One of the classes of immunoglobulins, IgG4, is increased with multiple shots, and that's not a protective antibody. That doesn't neutralize the virus. It actually helps accommodate the virus. And so this
Dr.
is a
Boston,
very
thank you
strategy.
so much.
Sure thing.
Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch and for this great insight. We appreciate it very much. All right, friends, coming up, authorities in Finland are at it again. They're putting a member of their parliament back on trial for merely expressing a biblical understanding of marriage and sexuality. We'll share the latest right after the break. Stick around.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss. Glad to be with you. You may recall the case of Päivi Räsänen in Finland. She was the Christian member of the parliament there who was prosecuted in June of 2019 under hate speech laws for merely expressing a biblical understanding of marriage and sexuality on social media, in a radio interview, and in a pamphlet that was some 20 years old. Well, thankfully, the District Court of Helsinki saw right through all the bogus charges against Päivi, and the court handed down a unanimous acquittal. But sadly, this story is not yet concluded with a good ending. Finnish authorities are now at it again, targeting Päivi again, and putting her on trial for a second time in the Finnish Court of Appeals. Clearly and sadly, freedom of religion and freedom of speech has double jeopardy principles, and that doesn't seem to exist in Finland. We're here to go over the latest in all of this is Paul Coleman. He's the executive director of Alliance Defending Freedom International. Paul, welcome back to Washington Watch. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, listen, for those in our audience who may not have heard of this particular case, who is Päivi, and just kind of give us the general lowdown on the case here.
Yeah, Päivi is a long-standing member of the Finnish Parliament. In fact, there are almost no one who has been in the Finnish Parliament longer than she has, now well over a quarter of a century. She's a committed Christian. She expresses her Christian beliefs very openly. She served as a government minister in a number of other senior roles over a quarter of a century in public office. And in 2019, the Finnish Lutheran Church decided to become an official sponsor of the Helsinki Pride Parade. Now, Päivi is a member of this church. Her husband is a pastor in the church. And she felt like she wanted to say something, so she took a picture of some Bible verses, posted them on Twitter, and essentially asked how could the decision of the Finnish Lutheran Church align with the clear teaching of Scripture. And from that moment, the police then started investigating her, essentially accusing her of committing hate speech for referring to homosexual behavior as a sin. And then they found a pamphlet that she had written over 20 years ago and started investigating that as well. And then as she was discussing all of these things on public radio, they pulled out 2 minutes of a 1-hour debate, took it out of context and made that into a charge as well. So she faces these 3 charges for hate speech simply for expressing her Christian beliefs on marriage and human sexuality. And the whole thing has been going on now for almost 4 years, in fact, over 4 years. She's been dragged through the courts, hours of police interrogation, all for expressing her deeply held beliefs.
Okay, so let's get to the bottom of this. What's really going on? You know, I think there's a lot of Americans who may be under the impression that European nations are just as free as we are here in the States. But, yeah, it's not, obviously not necessarily so. But tell us, why is the Finnish government targeting? That's really what is going on here. Why are they targeting Päivi and her Christian faith? What's really going on?
Well, we see this whole theme of censorship across the Western world right now. So we've talked a lot about cancel culture. We see it on college campuses. We see it on social media. What's different in Europe and other Western nations is we have a lot of criminal laws that censor speech as well. We call these hate speech laws. And they're essentially like a modern Western secular equivalent of blasphemy laws. And so if you say the wrong thing, if you go against the political or the cultural orthodoxies of the day, then these laws can be twisted and used and turned against you. And they're so subjective that they can really be arbitrarily enforced by the right police, the right prosecutor, anyone who disagrees with your beliefs. And so in the US and other places, we see the same sort of censorship mentality. The difference is in Europe and a lot of other countries, we have criminal laws backing that up.
So what's next for this case? Where do you foresee this going from here?
So it is being appealed, as you said, which is unheard of in a US system. I'm a British lawyer, and it's unheard of in my system. There's a few countries that allow criminal cases to be appealed, much like civil cases. So this is an appeal. Essentially, the case is being retried. If we win again, which we pray we will, it could still go on then to the Supreme Court of Finland. And of course, were we to lose at this stage, we would certainly appeal. And therefore, we're not done yet. So here we are 4 years in. It could well be at least another year that we're still battling this case. And what we often say in these hate speech cases is that the process becomes the punishment, because it's such an ordeal to have to defend yourself like this. It's such an ordeal to be dragged through the court, be interrogated by the police, that even if we eventually win and these charges are not successful and Päivi is acquitted, there will be many other people watching on thinking, well, I've got to be careful what I say because I don't want to have to go through the same ordeal. And so the prosecution itself creates a chilling effect for everyone else looking on. And that's why, firstly, it's important that we win the case. But secondly, we have to be bold in using our freedom of expression and making sure that these cases aren't brought in the first place.
And real quickly, where can people go to get updates on this case?
So we'll be on our ADF International's Twitter handle. We'll be providing live updates from the trial starting tomorrow. The courthouse is right behind me. And our website, adfinternational.org/free speech on trial.
Perfect. Paul Coleman with Alliance Defending Freedom International, thank you for sharing this incredible story, and hopefully we'll have a happy conclusion when it's all said and done. All right, friends, coming up, we're going to dive back into FRC's latest Worldview survey and talk about what we discovered when we come back.
It begins here, and here, and here. Every day. Before you stand, you need solid ground. Standing in a culture that wants you to surrender the truth won't work unless you have a firm foundation. At Family Research Council, we have that firm foundation, and you can find us standing. We stand for the value of all human life. We stand for the right of families to flourish. And every day we stand for your freedom to believe and to live out those beliefs both at home and abroad. We work with government officials, educating them on the issues from a biblical worldview. And when necessary, we hold them accountable. We equip Christians across America to be informed and to take action in their communities. With our daily radio program, television appearances, and vast online presence, we reach people where they are. We envision an America where all human life is valued, families flourish, and religious liberty thrives. And that won't be realized if we're not standing. Stand for faith. Stand for family. Stand for freedom. Stand with us at FRC.
I'm often asked by people, Tony, how do you stay encouraged? How do you deal with all of the stuff in Washington, D.C., the negative policies that are attacking our faith, our family, and our freedoms? Well, you want me to let you in on the secret? It's called the Word of God. And that is why the Family Research Council embarked on Stand on the Word, a 2-year journey through the Bible. It's a chronological Bible reading plan with just 10 to 15 minutes a day. In 2 years, you will have covered the entire Bible. And to go along with this, Monday through Friday, I do a morning devotional that goes along with the reading of the day. It's all designed to encourage you on this journey because the Word of God, as the psalmist said, in my affliction, here's my comfort. Your Word gives me life. That is our source of strength. To find out more, go to tonyperkins.com or frc.org/Bible. And I invite you to join me every morning for our Stand on the Word Bible devotion.
This fall, believers from across America will gather in our nation's capital. We'll hear from government leaders, policy experts, and leading Christian voices, learning how we can engage in government at every level, from local school boards to state legislatures to Congress and even the White House, to win back the soul of our nation. Join with us for the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit, Believe and Engage, September 15th through 17th. Register now at prayvotestand.org. FRC, celebrating 40 years with Congressman Matt Rosendale.
I think that the ability to get the message out to a larger audience is critically important, and 40 years that the Family Research Council has been doing that is not only gives hope to the members of Congress and Senate that are up here serving so that they know that they have that strong ally. We need your support. We need your voice out there, and the families across the country need it. And thank you again for everything that you do.
And thank you, Congressman Matt Rosendale, for those kind words. Friends, I tell you, the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit is right around the corner. It's coming up September 15th through 17th right here in Washington, D.C. We hope you'll be able to join us as we celebrate not only 40 years as FRC, but 40 years of standing for faith, family, and freedom. And now, more than ever, it's time for all of us to stand together. And you'll get that capacity, the information of how to do so effectively. We hope you'll be able to come join us. Registration is open. Just go to prayvotestand.org for details and to register, and we certainly hope you'll be able to join us live September 15th through the 17th. All right, over the past week, we've been unpacking the results of FRC's extensive survey on the views of adult churchgoers in America on social issues and worldview issues. There is really so much to cover in this survey. So back with me now to dig into some other areas that the survey revealed is David Clausen. He's the director of FRC's Center for Biblical Worldview. David, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's good to see you.
Good to see you and great to be back with you, Jody.
All right, there's so much to cover in all of this, and we've been able to spend some time as we've had some brief conversations throughout the week about this latest FRC Worldview survey. But let's begin just by, if you would, David, just remind us why FRC conducted this research in the first place and how we think it could potentially be helpful to the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we do at Family Research Council, one of the reasons a couple of years ago we even started the Center for Biblical Worldview is to come alongside pastors and Christian parents and Christian ministries to provide resources and help to help people think through all issues through the lens of a biblical worldview. And so what we wanted to do with this survey that we thought was really important is we really wanted to know, what do churchgoers, regular church attenders, really America's most devout Christians, what do they actually believe on all of these issues? Because, Jody, there's a lot of groups, big names like Pew and Gallup, that will do extensive surveys. But one of the things about their methodology is they will ask people, whether they identify as Christian. And if someone identifies as Christian, well, then their responses are marked down as a believer. The issue with that methodology is and I think I said this the other day, Jody, someone might not have been inside a church since they were dropped off at Vacation Bible School in the 1970s, and yet they're still marked down as a Christian. And so that's not super helpful for us to know what devout Christians actually believe. So again, in our national survey, we wanted to know what devout Christians actually believe, and so you actually had to attend church to take our survey. And of the people who took this, 72% are weekly churchgoers, and the other 28% are at least monthly churchgoers, which in our view helps us, we think, get the pulse of what America's most devout believers actually think when it comes to basic doctrinal issues and social and political issues.
And that really is what sets this survey apart, as you mentioned, from other surveys. I mean, it is one thing to say, oh, I consider myself a Christian. It's a totally different thing to be an individual who is devout in those beliefs and consistent week in and week out, month after month, in a specific body of believers. So that is what really puts this survey apart from others, and it is that reason that really we believe is going to be helpful information for the church abroad. That's basically the bottom line of it, isn't it?
No, it is, and because what we think we can do with this survey is by asking about basic doctrinal issues, basic theological questions, social and political issues with these results, which I invite everybody to look at. This survey is on our website, frc.org/worldview. Our hope is that Sunday school teachers and pastors and other ministry leaders can kind of teach to the test, so to speak. They can see areas where faithful Christians are confused or maybe lacking knowledge. And so again, we hope this will help. For example, Jody, one of the things we asked was about homosexuality. And one of the questions we asked is, do you believe the Bible is clear on this issue? And 19%, so that's about 1 in 5 people who go to church, said the Bible, in their view, was unclear or ambiguous. And so that little piece of data right there, we think a pastor could use and say, well, my goodness, if 1 out of 5 people in my church believe the Bible is unclear on homosexuality, I can work into my sermon rotation maybe a sermon on Romans 1 or 1 Corinthians 6:9 or 1 Timothy 1:10 to make sure my people understand that God's Word is actually clear on this issue. So again, that's just one example of many I could give that we hope a pastor or a leader looking at this survey will be able to say, here are areas where I can focus my instruction, my teaching, and my catechesis.
I think that is an excellent example of how this information can be used, and we hope it will be used. So you and I have been able to talk throughout this week on different aspects of the surveys, specifically worldview issues and abortion and that type of thing. And And I know people can and hope they will go look at the survey for themselves at what you described, frc.org/worldview. But what, if anything, did this survey show about what Christians believe specifically about things like transgenderism?
Yeah, Jody, so we actually asked, again, out of the 60 questions we asked 2 specific questions related to the transgender issue. And it was kind of in the section where we asked people specifically, do you believe the Bible addresses this matter? And then we listed a host of issues. And so on the transgender issue, we actually asked the question, do you believe the Bible addresses the matter of whether we can know someone's gender? And 59% said that the Bible was clear and decisive on that question. 15% said the Bible was unclear or ambiguous. And then another 18% said the Bible does not address it. Very similarly, we ask the question, does the Bible address the question, is transgenderism morally acceptable? So is transgenderism morally acceptable? And does the Bible address that question? And only 52% of folks, again, these are regular churchgoers, 52% said that they thought the Bible was clear and decisive on the question. 19% said the Bible was unclear or ambiguous, and a full 20% admitted they did not know whether the Bible addressed the question whether transgenderism is morally acceptable. Of the questions we asked, actually, Jody, this was one of the ones that polled the lowest. And so I think there's some things we should be thinking about and learning in regards to this information.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that sounds like really low numbers for regular church attenders who are unclear as to what the Bible has to say on such an incredibly important and current issue as transgenderism. So what do you think is behind this? Where do we go from? Like, to you were surprised by that, it sounds like, as well. So where do we go from here on a question like that?
Yeah, I think I initially, admittedly, was surprised, and the more I thought about it, Jody, because the question we ask about marriage, do you believe the Bible is clear on marriage? A full 75% said the Bible was clear and decisive on marriage. And that's something we've been debating now for over a decade. And so I think one of my takeaways on the question of transgenderism, that only 52% thought the Bible was clear and decisive. Well, one, I think that, unfortunately, the church often follows the culture. And so I think we've been talking about transgenderism less than, say, issues related to marriage or life. And so I think there's a lot of catching up that our churches are still doing. Now, you and I work in politics and public policy related at the intersection of our faith. And so, again, this issue for us, I think we've been talking about it for several years, at least since 2016. I remember when Bruce Jenner announced to the world, he was Caitlyn Jenner. I think since then, I've really focused on the transgender issue. I think it's important for us to realize, though, that a lot of church-going Americans haven't been as focused on the issue. And so when they were asked about it, does the Bible address it? They thought, maybe not. I can't think of a passage. And so I think that's why, rather than following the culture, the church needs to observe the culture and realize if this is the issue being talked about, we need to provide teaching on Genesis 1 and 2, on male and female being created in God's image. And so that's definitely an area of opportunity, in my view, for the church.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it is probably a natural reality that the church kind of follows culture until there's preaching and teaching from the pulpit to address those cultural issues, and that this is one of those issues that immediately needs some attention in the pulpits. I think that's incredibly valuable information. Now, an encouraging part of this, another encouraging part, there are many encouraging parts, but another one, at least to me, is how many churchgoers believe that the Bible speaks to the issue of religious liberty, which these days we're seeing under great attack and assault and challenge. What were some of the numbers that came forth on this issue, and were you encouraged by the things that you found here?
I was, Jody. I was actually pleasantly surprised when we asked the question, do you believe the Bible addresses the issue of religious freedom? Because if you read the scripture, the words religious freedom or religious liberty actually don't appear anywhere on the pages of the Bible. Now, I argue that the principles of religious freedom are deeply in the narrative of Scripture. I could give a lot of examples. Just one, Jesus never forced anyone to follow him. He even let the rich young ruler walk away. When you read the book of Acts, Paul was always exhorting and persuading people. He understood that you couldn't coerce anybody to believe something that they didn't believe in their heart. As Christians, we believe the Holy Spirit does the work of persuasion. And so when we asked that question, I thought this number might be low, but it was actually 69% of regular churchgoers thought they believed the Bible addressed this issue of religious liberty. It was only 9% said that the Bible didn't address it. So, Jody, I was very encouraged that people are reading their Bibles and understanding that that principle of religious freedom is actually in the pages of the Bible.
Yeah, that really is good news. There's so much to cover here, David. I just don't know which way to go at some point. But let me go back. I don't mean to circle back around, but I want to throw this back to you and get a little bit more clarity on this. We've already talked about what the survey had to say about where Christians are on the issue of abortion. And that was really good news, very good news. But there's some other statistics in this topic that we didn't cover. And so going a little bit deeper into all of this, what do regular church attenders actually believe the Bible says in regard to when life begins?
Yeah, Jody, good question. And it was encouraging, like you said. The vast majority of regular churchgoers identify as pro-life. It was a significant percentage. But then, again, and this is why I think the survey is helpful, we ask more specific follow-up questions. And we ask the question, do you believe the Bible actually identifies when human life begins? And 65% told us that they believed that the Bible identified when life began. 21% said the Bible did not identify when life began, and 13% said they didn't know. So again, 65% in their view said that they believe the Bible identified when life began. Jody, we asked those people a follow-up question. So just that 65%, we asked them a follow-up question. You believe the Bible identifies when life begins. Where is that point? And of that 65%, Jody, only 52% actually said that they believed that the Bible taught that life began at conception. 8% actually said they believed the Bible said life begins with breath. 7% said that they believed that viability is when life begins. Another 6% said it was around 6 weeks after fertilization. And a full 12% who had initially said they thought the Bible identified when life began, they backed off the question and said, well, actually, we really don't know. And so again, 65% said in their view the Bible identified a point, and it was only 52%. So just again, perspective, only 345 people, Jody, out of the over 1,000 people who took our survey, said the Bible teaches that life begins with conception. And so although there's encouraging things on the life issue, this is one where, to me, it shows that as pastors, Christian leaders, we need to be going a level deeper to helping our people really understand that the Bible affirms the personhood of the unborn at the moment of conception.
Yeah, that's really interesting information to me on an issue that we've dealt with now for decades and decades, to see that there's still some issues of that need some biblical clarity on when life begins. All right, listen, David, again, I hate that our time is running out, but we've only got about a minute or so to go here. So let's wrap up. How can pastors and Christian teachers use this survey to help the people develop a Christian worldview? About 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, in short, Jody, I would just encourage everyone to look at the survey to see what we've discovered about the theological worldview and social beliefs of America's devout Christians. And then, like I said, teach to the test. Let's show our people what the Bible actually says on these issues. And my prayer is this will lead to deeper discipleship and more faithful understanding of all these devout Christians.
Well, thank you, David Clausen, Director of FRC's Center for Biblical Worldview. One more time, real quickly, where can people go to find this survey?
frc.org/worldview.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate it. Friends, that wraps up this edition of Washington Watch. Tony will join you tomorrow. Thank you so much. God bless.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.
Over the last 20 years, with all your support, we've been able to not only launch the original MyPillow, but also the MyPillow mattress topper, Giza Dream bed sheets, My Slippers, and the MyPillow bath towels. But there's so much more. In fact, we have over 200 products, and I'm so confident that you'll love each and every one of them that when you go to MyPillow.com now, you'll immediately receive a free gift valued at $20 just for checking out the website. No purchase necessary. Get everything from MyPillow blankets, sleepwear, kitchen towels, mattresses, duvets, pet beds, body pillows, comforters, couch pillows, bathrobes, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And remember, just for checking out MyPillow.com, you'll immediately receive a free gift valued at $20. No purchase necessary. This is a limited time promotion, so go to MyPillow.com now.